we have three of Warren County's absolute finest here today. And all three of them are graduates of Warren County High School. I was very fortunate to be in the same class as McMinnville Police Chief Brian Denton and Warren County Sheriff Tommy Myers. And we're very, very proud that our class has stepped up now and is taking leadership roles here in Warren County. They are at the pinnacle of their law enforcement agencies. And then we also have former Director Mark Gwynn of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. He started there, I think, he was there for 30 years, is that right? Yeah. He retired last year from the department. He served admirably for 30 years with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. And you couldn't ask for three better mentors if you're interested in law enforcement career. So it's my pleasure to introduce Sheriff Myers, former Director Gwynn, and Police Chief Brian Denton.
Talking about, of course, Tommy and I were the same. We graduated high school with Susan a long time ago. It'd be about 40 years this summer. We got a reunion coming up. Actually, Mark was a couple grades behind us, but I was Mark's supervisor when he was at the police department. He spent about a 4-year stint here at the police department. And we were at something not too long ago, and I was asked what it was like to be Mark Gwynn's supervisor when he was a patrolman at the police department. And I told them that I had the right to remain silent. That it's just, we won't even go into that. I told another group that some of those things from a long time ago, it's kind of like the Kennedy files. They're not to be open until the year 2050 or something. That just need to move on. But anyway, I came into law enforcement kicking and screaming. I did not want to be a police. The last thing in the world I wanted to be. I was raised by a career law enforcement officer. He had been a deputy sheriff for like 20 years before that, and just something I was not interested in. I'd seen some of the things he had gone through, and that's something I did not want to do. He encouraged me to go to work at the age of 20 at the Warren County Sheriff's Department. The sheriff had just died. Another sheriff had been appointed. I went to work as a jailer dispatcher. August 1st, 1981. How were you in 1981?
I wasn't born yet.
Okay, that's what I thought.
9 years.
I actually went in. I went in and I trained on a Wednesday night for 2 hours. Went on Thursday night, trained for 2 hours. Went on Friday night at 11 o'clock at night. It was me and 47 inmates. And I honestly, I literally did not know what I was doing. The only instruction they gave me was at 4:30 in the morning, what's called trustees, inmates that are kind of free to roam the place because they've earned that status, and they'll, just get them into the kitchen. They'll cook breakfast, serve it, do all those things. I was okay. It sounds simple enough. So I did that, got the inmates up. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. So back then we started in this long hallway. We go to a place called the bullpen. So it's a big steel door that must weigh 300 pounds. And you open it up, and there's literally a cage inside this, about the size of this room. When you say, Tommy, about the size of this room, a cage where it's built for 15 people. There's at times, I know there have been 50 people in that thing, but the first time I opened the door, I heard somebody go, "Brian!" I thought, what? It was an uncle. I thought, oh my goodness. So, get me out. I said, I barely know how to get out of this place myself. So, start back up the hallway, the other side, a place called Maximum Security. There's 2 little cells within a door. Open the door, I said, "Brian!" Another uncle. So back in those days, it was it was not unheard of course, but there weren't very many female inmates at all. So started down what we call the side cells, got to the end of that, and heard somebody go, "Brian!" In the female cell, a cousin. So I thought, my dad was my supervisor, so I thought if we can get him out here, we'd have a family reunion before we, that's my first day in law enforcement. That's how it all started out. I came into it kicking and screaming. That's the last thing in the world I wanted to do. Things kind of clicked, and I don't know why. We were in the middle of a sheriff's election whenever I started there, because I thought that'd be my out for this. The sheriff will be defeated, and I can go back to doing something else. things started to click. There was an opening came up with the McMinnville Police Department, and 37 years later, here I am. I know some of you guys, I don't know if we're going to do a Q&A later or whatever, but I've been asked many times just the future of law enforcement. Where should you go? What should you know, what's the key? I think, I don't know if you guys agree with me or not, but I think, well, the first thing, be able to put your thoughts down on paper or onto a computer screen or something. Just be able to write a report, English, I guess. Just please be able to just put your words into it is coherent. The second thing I would say is science. Just get a understanding of science. When I was at the FBI Academy, which Mark was helped me get into that about 10 years ago, I was into about the third week, and I was staying. It was I don't know if it's in Madison or Jefferson. Anyway, we're staying in a dorm. It's set up like college classrooms. You got dorms there on the side, all those kind of things. So one afternoon, I got on the elevator, and everybody's done with their classes to be just a jam of people. We started up in that, and I got an elevator with like 4 young ladies. So there's all kinds of things going on there. There's like the FBI agent class. There's leadership classes. There are they're training them to be forensic scientists or whatever. So, but I get into the elevator, and there are 3, 4 young ladies in there, and they're giggling. And I thought, okay. And then, of course, they've been in the class all day, and they're giggling about some guy that was sitting across the room. He was cute. He was looking at me. No, he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at her and going through all that stuff. And I thought, well, this is a leadership class. It's here just for high school students or something. Come to find out, they were in a class that was there studying to be computer analysts for the FBI. And I guess what caught my attention about that was their starting pay was more than an FBI agent. So that really got my attention as what the future of law enforcement is. And I don't know if Mark would concur with that in the TBI when he was there or not, but that was kind of really got my attention. Well, that's one thing that stands out in my mind from up there. But I have again this August will be 38 years that I have been a police officer. 37 of those with the police department. My original career goal was to be a shift lieutenant because we have patrolmen, sergeants, we have master patrol officers. And lieutenants that are on the shifts, the guys you see out in the cars. But my goal was to be a shift lieutenant. It's the only position in the department I haven't held. I started patrolman, sergeant. I was sergeant when Mark was there. And everybody gets into this job, 30 years is your magic out. That's the magic number. Just because you get 30 years, retire. I got to 30 years, and things just kind of fell into place for me. My old boss was leaving. I had 30 years in, and the city administrator said, you ought to give this a try. So this summer, that will be 8 years ago that I've been the police chief. So anyway, are we supposed to question and answer now, or how would that be?
If you would like.
Okay.
If you have a question, please come up here so we can pick it up on the microphone, I suppose. Anybody have a question about career in the city police or police in general at this point? You gave us the steps of
Okay.
how you start in and how far you can go up. How much education would you like to have for a beginning policeman?
I'm hiring two. I'm in the process of hiring 2 people now. One of them has he completed the law enforcement program at Cleveland State. I'm hiring another fellow and that would make he'd come in as a certified officer. That saves us a lot of trouble in doing that. Hiring another fellow that's just graduated from UT Chattanooga with a criminal justice degree. So they're coming in kind of on equal footing. I will have to send the officer or the officer I'm hiring that is a UT Chattanooga graduate. I'll have to send him to the academy, which is 12 long weeks now. So that being said, we like to bring people in that have a minimum of an associate's degree. That is not required. It's not required by the state. The minimum standards are or 18 a high school diploma, and we like to go past that. Anything above that is actually very good. There are two regional academies, Walter State, Cleveland State. I think UT Martin is working on one to get that certification behind you. If you come in with a degree and you've attended a law enforcement academy, you'll get a job. And I when I came up, I started at the very bottom and worked my way up. I have sat in enough classrooms over the last 38 years that it's just unreal, the amount of training you go through. 500-600, I'd have to, the number 500-600 hours of training at basic. We're in the middle of it. I had to leave in-service training actually to come here for this class, because you train continually while you're doing this job, and you have to. I mean, it's just the litigious world we live in now. It's even if you mess up and you've got the training, you just mess up is one thing. But if you fail to train, that's the huge deal anymore. The city of McMinnville, actually, if you don't have a degree and you come in, or you've been working on one, we will assist you. The city will pay up to $3,000 a year for your tuition if it's something related to the job. That is one of the benefits for that. So if you come in without a degree, we want you to work toward one. It's always preferable, of course, to have that, but it is not necessarily required with us.
So you do a lot of training up front, and then you
Yes.
have certification training
Correct.
every year?
And there's all kinds of specialized jobs within law enforcement that, and Tommy will tell you, we have, it's a huge part of our budget is training that we send our folks to.
Right. This young man has a question. Can you go over there first?
I sure can. I had a quick question. Someone say coming in with a degree, does that take any time off of how much they would have to spend in corrections before they went to the road? Starting from the bottom, going to the top? Like say an associate's degree?
Probably not. Tommy's probably better answer that than me, because we don't operate a jail. I started as we call it jailer, back then corrections officer. That's how I started.
Okay.
But I'm assuming it's just particular to the situation of the department. Would be my answer. Tommy can probably answer that better than me.
Okay, so basically someone with a high school diploma, 18 coming in, would have to spend the same amount of time in corrections as far as someone coming in with an associate's degree and would have to.
The better your resume looks, the more training you have coming in. There's no guarantee, but generally that'll get you ahead of the pack.
Just a little, maybe a few months, but it'd get you ahead a little bit.
Sure, and it always depends on the situation.
Okay. I just wanted to ask that. I appreciate your
Okay,
time.
yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question at this point?
Hello, everyone. I'm Tommy Myers, your sheriff, born and raised in Warren County. My entire law enforcement career has been right here at our sheriff's department. And to follow up on your question real quick before I get started to answer that, whether you have, and I have also employees who have their 4-year degree, 2-year degree, and just a GED or high school diploma. It starts with, your work ethic. When you come in, yes, it may, like Brian said, get you in the door quicker if you got a degree and you're educated. It goes back to what he said to begin with, report writing. All this, and it's also character, ladies and gentlemen, and who you are as a person, that goes a long way in law enforcement. But that said, once you get in the door, then it's up to you to do the job and perform, like we expect you to, and put yourself ahead of the class, so to speak. Does that answer your question?
Yes, the better you perform, the quicker you get on the road.
That's right. The better employee you are. Every year, just so you know, or every time we have an opening on the road, that's where I try to promote within, because, we have employees that come in as jailers, and we have several of them. We have, almost 40 now, which we're like 16 at least short. We're understaffed. We've been understaffed for years. When I walked in the door, we had 337 inmates. We have 251 beds. So there are people laying on the floor everywhere when I walked in the door 7 months ago. Yesterday, we had 226. So we've been able to get the numbers down, which we've been averaging over 320 inmates for many years now. But like I was saying, I try to promote within because employees come in and want a jail, and honestly, that's a good way to start. Being a jailer, you learn a lot. You learn about the people that are in jail, why they're there, and you know, the kind of people that you have to deal with inside. And that's the same people, if you become a police officer on the road, that's the same people you have to deal with out there. And you learn a lot about them inside. But being inside the jail, there's no set number. If I have an opening on the road and you've been a good employee like we've talked about, rose to the top, and I'll usually take 4 or 5 of the people that want to go the road. Excuse me. And I'll put them through a series of tests, whether it be written, physical, all that sort of stuff. Because to send someone to the academy, it costs our taxpayers at least $10,000. So, and in the past, we've had employees that we thought, you know, would make it through the academy and did not. Well, it's just like taking that money and lighting a match to it. You know, that's taxpayers' money. I don't like to do that. So that's why we select those 4, 5, 6, and we try to pick, you know, our choice to represent us on the streets as a police officer, and then someone that we know is going to make it through that academy, that we're not wasting our time and money. That said, back to the other, I was, like I said, born and raised here, started my career here. Mason Black was the sheriff at the time. He had been asking me, Tommy, come see me sometime. You'd make a good deputy. You know, I'd known him a long time. One day I was just driving by the jail over here, and I said, okay, I don't have anything to do. I drove in. I could stop and talk to him. 30 minutes later, literally, I walked out of that jail with a badge in my hand. That's what started my career. It didn't take long. I went to the road, and after a year or two, I became an investigator. Mr. Mark Gwynn here had gotten on with TBI, and we ended up working a double homicide right off the bat together that I actually happened in DeKalb County, which was solved, by the way. These are 2 great men right here, I'll just tell you. Again, I know, Susan, I don't know who did that picture, but that picture was of me, ladies and gentlemen. If you've seen it just a few months ago, it was 20 years ago for these guys. They didn't have a gray hair on their head, okay?
10 years.
Whatever. But anyway, they're great men, and I've had the pleasure of working with them my entire career. But moving on, I became an investigator, which I really loved. Actually, I was on the road a year, and the sheriff called me in, promoted me to sergeant. The next week he called me in, oh, I'm in trouble, I'm on the carpet already. A week later, he had a lieutenant's badge and an investigator's badge laying there. Take your pick. I said, well, I've been an investigator, it'd be kind of cool. So for the next 18 years, I was an investigator. And of course, you know, Jackie Matheny, I'm sure you all know Jackie Matheny. We've had the pleasure of having him as our sheriff for 24 years. 10 years ago, he asked me to be his chief deputy, which I accepted. And then, you know, he decided to retire, and I was amongst 7 people that ran, and here I am. And I'll tell you, in the last 7 months, it's been a whirlwind. It's been crazy. But I feel like we've really accomplished a lot. I'm very passionate about what I do. I'm passionate about who I hire and put in certain positions, and I feel like I've done a good job at that. But I want people to have that same passion and dedication. You know, back to the question you asked, that's one of those things. You know, all we have, ladies and gentlemen, as a police officer is, you know, is our word. You know, if we lose that, our character, our credibility, we don't have anything as a police officer. So, you know, when my current employees, you know, if they make a mistake, we're all human, right? If you make a mistake, just own up to it. Let's fix it. You know, don't lie about it. You know, you lie about something that you do, you know, you lose that character, right? And that trust. So that's very, very important. Anyone have any questions? I can stand here and talk all day. I got all kinds of stories if you want to hear them. But like my first night, no, honestly, first night I drove a car, police car. Tell you this real quick. I was riding, and my lieutenant was riding with me. I got to drive. Oh boy, you know, my first night. There was only a couple of us on shift at that time at night. But there was a call. We were out checking buildings way out in the county, and there was a call. Troopers and Manchester PD and Tullahoma were chasing this car, and it was coming into Warren County. Long story short, I turn around. I'm heading into town, and as I realized we're paralleling that chase, and they're telling us it's coming into town. I thought, oh, it's right here at us. So I pull out on the highway, and I get off on the shoulder because as two city police officers come driving by right in front of me, they pulled bumper to bumper in front of the road. Here come all the blow lights coming over the hill. I pull over to the side. Well, that car didn't stop. All of a sudden, the two police officers that were driving the cars, they dove in the ditch. And that car hit those two police cars, and they just did this number right in front of me. You know, spare tire, trunks coming open. It's like something you see on TV. And this is my first night. I'm freaking out. You know, and it was three boys. They were all sitting in the front seat, and it's like slow motion when you see that. I was getting out of my car, and I saw it wasn't stopping. I slammed the door, and I jumped back in. And that car hit those cars right in front of me and just slid to a stop right beside me. Of course, we had to airlift all three of those boys in that car. And I still this day don't really know why they ran from Tullahoma. But, you know, that was my first night driving a car, and I just looked over at my lieutenant later, and I said, does this happen all the time? You know? So, am I doing the right thing? But, you know, I have always been passionate about what I've done for 30 years. I care about my community. I love each and every one of you. Our guys will die for you, and they don't even know you. You know, that to me means the world to me. To put a gun and a badge on your hip, you know, I praise all these officers that do that and want to go out and risk their lives and not know if they're coming home or not every day. It impresses me. I love them to death, and they do you too, I promise you. And we'll always be there for you. Anything you need, that's what we're for. We work for you.
Could you discuss the gender ratio? I'm sure you've seen an increase from 0 women to, I
Well,
don't know what number you have now in gender ratio of
Well,
hires.
of hires, right now, COs, like I said, we have about 40, and we're almost half and half. You know, in all honesty, we have not had a female jail director in a long time, since I first started. But Jackie Rackley is my jail director and doing a fabulous job. And honestly, I think, of course, when I walked in the jail my first night, we had a riot. You know, like I said, it's been a whirlwind since I started. But it's almost like having her there as the jail director. You know, we had a big stern man there before, and now she's there. She's a stern female, but it's almost like she has this mother effect to a lot of these inmates. Because honestly, a lot of these inmates don't have family. Maybe they didn't grow up with a mother. I truly feel like that's part of it, because they are all, yes ma'am, yes ma'am. It's like they want that love in their life, and she'll tell them, you know, that she cares about them and wants them to get out of jail, and we all do. You know, there's some people, yes, that are in our jail that I don't want them to see the light of day, and they don't need to, for all of our safety. But there are people in there that, like I was saying before, made a mistake, you know, and drugs do not discriminate, ladies and gentlemen. They will, you know, they will ruin your life. If nothing else, in my career, I have seen this over and over and over, and these guys will tell you the same thing. Drugs, they don't discriminate. They will ruin your life. I've seen people with 6-figure jobs, you know, boats and cars and homes and wife and kids, and lose it all. They'll take these drugs till they've lost their job, they lost their home, they've lost their wife, they've lost their kids, but guess what they still want? That next high. Yes, ma'am.
How many women officers do you have on the road?
On the road right now, we don't have any. We had one just this last week we were sending to the academy. We had a female that worked in our jail for 4 or 5 years. She went to the academy, was a deputy, then she became an SRO, and then she had to kind of get out of law enforcement for family reasons. But I would love to have a female officer right now. Like I said, we have several inside the jail that's their goal. But, you know, like the one I was just mentioning, she was in our jail for 4 or 5 years, and she came to my office talking about something one day, and I'd always wondered why. She always did a great job. She was a supervisor in the jail, and she said something, and I said, wait a minute, what'd you just say? And I said, do you want to go be a deputy? She did, yeah, that's what I've always wanted. I said, why have you not told me? This was when I was chief deputy. And she said, well, everybody back there said if I was a female, don't bother. I said, what? I said, you really want to go the road? She said, yes. And 3 months later, I had her in the academy. So, you know, I just ask all my employees, let me know what your goals are, what you want to do. I mean, we have canines, we have SROs, we have court officers. You know, there's, like Brian said, there's several different avenues you can go in law enforcement. It doesn't have to just be a deputy on the road. I mean, there's other things. Any more questions? I don't want to keep you over here.
We'll have a chance for questions at the end if
All right,
anybody.
sounds good.
But as I turned on the Cadillac Lane here, you know, I remembered the night that Brian and I was chasing a car right down Cadillac Lane. Pretty high speed chase there, so.
Mark jumped a 4 foot fence too. He crashed his car.
Yeah, the guy crashed. But those were the good old days, I promise you. I'll talk a little bit about my career and how I became TBI director, and that's kind of was always the first question that I always got when I would go out and speak was, how'd you become, you know, the top cop of the state? And then I'll tell you a little bit about what I saw, the changes in law enforcement as far as hiring and how we hired at TBI, and basically state and federal kind of hires the same way. So if you got aspirations of being a TBI agent or FBI agent, the paths are very similar. So I'll give you some tips on that and what I saw after hiring hundreds and hundreds of agents. I'm one of these people that was very fortunate. I knew what I wanted to be early in life. My mom's got pictures of me when I'm like 5 years old, and I've got my badge and gun on, and I'd run around the house and try to arrest my older brothers and sisters, and they would punt me like a football across the room. So I knew I wanted to be a police officer. So I finished high school here at Warren County Senior High, and I go off to MTSU. I become a student patrol officer at MTSU with the goal of hoping that would help me become a police officer. So I graduate from MTSU and come back, and I talked to my father one day, and I said, I need your help. And he said, what do you need? I knew he knew the police chief. I said, I want you to take me up to the police department and introduce me to the police chief because I want to be a police officer. And my dad looks at me and he shakes his head. He goes, your mother is not going to like this. I said, well, look, we don't have to tell her till it's over with. So I get in the car with my dad and we drive up to the police department, and we go in and meet the chief, and the chief says, why would you want to be a police officer? You have a college degree and all this, you know. At that time, very few people at the police department, maybe one person had a college degree. And I said, that's just what I want to be. And if I can't be a police officer here, I'm going to go somewhere else. So 2 or 3 weeks later, I was a police officer here in McMinnville. And I tell people, everybody asks, you know, after 33-year career in law enforcement and being the TBI director, what's the highlight of your career? And I quickly will always say being a McMinnville police officer. I had more fun protecting the people that I knew and loved than any other job that I held. But as Brian said, as chance has it, me and my lieutenant, we were at Jay's Restaurant in the mall one day, and a man walked up to me. Or walked up to us. He knew my lieutenant, and his name was Preston Huckabee. And he was a supervisor with TBI, but he lived here in McMinnville. So my lieutenant tells this man, said, look, you need to get him. He doesn't need to stay here and be a police officer. You need to hire him. So Mr. Huckabee sat down and started asking me these questions. And he told me, he said, I tell you what I'll do. You got to go to Nashville and you have to take this test. He said, I've been told it's a pretty hard test. But if you can pass this test, I'll get you a job with TBI. So I'm thinking, yeah, I don't know if I believe that or not, because you know how everybody tells you I can get you a job or I'll help you. So I go to Nashville and I take this test and I walk out of the room and I go, I won't ever be a TBI agent. That was absolutely the hardest test I'd ever taken in my life, in 4 years of college, high school, and everything. But somehow I did pass the test, and a few months later, I was a TBI agent. So I started out as an agent, started out in Nashville in a unit called Special Investigations. And then in 1992, we had a new director come in. And I'd always wanted to be a field agent. I always wanted to work the violent crimes, the murders and stuff. And in Nashville, we were working a lot of white-collar crime. So when the new director come in, I said, is it possible that I could go back to my hometown as a field agent? And he said, yeah, sure. And I met with the DA, and he agreed to it. And so I come back to McMinnville and was the field agent here up until 1996, when I got called to Nashville and was told I was going to be promoted, which I fought. I did not want to go back to Nashville, but I had no choice. So I went back to Nashville in 1996 as the executive officer, doing a lot of special projects, building of our new headquarters, the Top 10 Fugitive Program, things like that. And then in 2001, the director called me in his office and he says, the assistant director of our forensic division. Now the forensic division of TBI is a division with all the crime laboratories. And at that time, we had 5 crime laboratories in the state. He said, the assistant director is retiring and I want you to take that position. And I said, well, we got a problem. And he said, what is it? I said, well, I don't know the difference between a telescope and a microscope, so I'm not the guy to go over to the forensic division. He goes, yeah, I want you to go there and I want you to lead it, which I'll talk a little bit about later, about being a leader, which is very important. So I do that. I go over there in 2001 and really thought that would be the end of my career. I thought I would fail miserably because I just didn't know anything about science. I wasn't a scientist. So it happened to work out good. Started off rocky. They didn't like me too well, but it finally smoothed out. And then in 2004, the director retired, and they went through it's a long, exhaustive process to pick the TBI director. It's a very unique position. Even though the governor selects the TBI director is not part of the governor's cabinet. So you don't, in essence, you don't answer to anybody as TBI director. So it's a very, very independent position. Because of corruption back in the 70s, they separated TBI out and made it an independent agency and made the director's position an independent position. The director of TBI can't be fired. The director of TBI can only be impeached for criminal wrongdoing by the legislature. So that tells you kind of how powerful it is. And there's no other Bureau of Investigation, and there's 35 in the country, that is set up like that. Tennessee is the only one that has that true independence. So in 2004, the director retires. They go through this process of picking TBI director. I didn't apply, didn't want it, but the governor throws out all the names for the 3 names that was sent up to him to be TBI director. So everybody's starting to panic now. And I start getting people coming to me saying, put your name in the second go around. So the deadline was at 4 p.m. on a Friday. At 3:58, I submitted my resume. And it was not that impressive of a resume, but I just thought, at least I'll do it so everybody, when we get whoever this jerk is, it will get for the next director. That's your thought process. People would say, well, if you put your name in, we wouldn't have this person here now. So I put my name in. 72 people from all over the United States applied for the job. They narrowed it down to 6. I made the 6. They narrowed it down to 3. I made the 3. I go in and meet with the governor. Never met the governor in my life. Interview with the governor. And a couple weeks after that interview, actually I went down to meet with him to tell him that I was going to pull my name out. I did not want to be the director. I was going to allow him to pick one of the other 2 candidates. And when I went in his office, I began to talked to him about that, and he says, just wait a minute. You want to be TBI director? And I said, well, one day. I just think it's not my time. He goes, well, you're wrong. I got a 2 o'clock press conference. Be back at 2 o'clock. You're the new TBI director. So like a dog chasing a car, what do I do with it now that I got it, right? So that's how I became TBI director. And it's kind of funny, you know, people think to get positions like that you've got to go out here and politic and know this senator or representative or whatever. You really don't. I can tell you. Now, do people get jobs that way? Absolutely. I mean, don't be naive. In the real world, there's people that get jobs through politics, but you don't always have to do that. You can get your job through working hard, and I would tell you that through education and through hard work, something good is going to happen. I promise you that. Now, that's my career path. So how do you become a TBI agent? I wish I could say that you could meet a man like Mr. Huckabee and 2 or 3, 6 months later, you'd be a TBI director. It doesn't happen like that anymore. As I was saying earlier today, I was so blessed as a director. At a time when there's just, you know, I've seen a shift in dynamics of law enforcement where, especially after Ferguson, Missouri, after that shooting and all of that there's just not a lot of people wanting to get into law enforcement on a local level. And I can go to almost any, as I traveled across the state and talked to every sheriff and every chief, one of the things that was a common denominator was we're having trouble hiring right now. Just people aren't wanting to get into the business. There's so much scrutiny, there's so much pressure, people just don't want. I had the exact opposite effect. For TBI, a large class would be 10, maybe a few times we had up to 15 in a class, according to how retirements were. For those positions, I would always have between 1,000 and 1,600 people apply for those positions. And I would interview at least 500 for those few positions. So you say, well, how do I set myself apart? How do I become a TBI agent? I tell everybody, start on the local level. I'm not saying you can't walk in the door as a TBI agent, but I would tell you that the chances are almost slim to none. Now, if you want to be a forensic scientist, that's different. Go major in chemistry, biology. You have to have a major in chemistry or biology. And you can walk in the door as a forensic science. But if you want to be an agent out here working cases, then I tell you to start at the local level. And, you know, these guys will tell you, you know, we don't train, you know, the sheriffs and chiefs used to get upset with me because I'd steal their best people. But that's what I did, you know? But I can tell you that neither one of these men sitting here would ever stop anybody from advancing. And yeah, they spent money training you and all of that, but if you were to go and apply for Highway Patrol, TBI, FBI, they're gonna help you. And 95%, 99% of the sheriffs and chiefs all across this state are the same way. They understand that everybody wants to do the very best they can do. And for law enforcement, the local level's the training ground. At one time, TBI was a training ground for the FBI. We'd have when I came on, TBI agents would leave left and right going to a federal agency. That doesn't happen anymore because nobody wants to go to live in New York, Miami, and Chicago and all that. But I say start at the local level. But moreover than that, what I saw in my last 5 or 6 years as director, what kept more people from becoming TBI agents was social media. Now, I'm here to tell you, and I don't know a lot about, I don't have Facebook and all that, so Instagram, I don't know a lot about it. But I saw more people during their background, and I'm gonna tell you, you're gonna go through the most extensive background check you'll ever have in your life to be a TBI agent. And they would lose out because of something they posted when they were in high school on social media, because it don't ever go away. Don't think it does. I had people in my technical services unit could pull up stuff from 20 years back. And don't think you're gonna come in, and when we ask for your Facebook PIN number or however, you're gonna say, I'm not gonna give it to you. Guess what? I'm not gonna give you a job. I'm gonna get on your page, because this is the deal. And this is what I've had to tell some people, and I broke some hearts. I tell everybody, I lost more friends during hiring processes than anything, because they called and want their son or daughter hired, and I couldn't do it because of something in their background. But what I tell the young people that would come in and go, I just made a mistake. I didn't mean, I was young. And I said, I get it. You know, we're not looking for perfection at TBI, but this is how I have to look at this. Sure, I can go ahead and hire you, and you've got this sitting out here somewhere on, you know, in the cloud or wherever it sits. And it's something that's pretty bad that you posted or whatever. There's gonna be a day when you, as an agent, hopefully you'll solve a crime. And when you solve that crime and you make that arrest, there's gonna be a day probably that there's gonna be a trial, okay? And you're gonna have to get up on that witness stand and you're gonna have to testify. Any good defense attorney knows that the one way to win a case is not only do you attack the message, which is how an agency or an investigator worked that case and what you did or did not do, but you attack the messenger, especially if you've done a good job working that case. If I can't break down what you did and find fault in it, then I'm gonna go after you as a person. So when that defense attorney gets, and they're gonna get a hold of that, whatever's out there, what are you gonna do when that defense attorney hands you that post that you put on Facebook? What are you gonna say? There's nothing you can say. And then that defense attorney is gonna say, this agent is no better than my client, the murderer. Look what they posted. And your credibility's gone, and the potential to lose that entire trial is in jeopardy because of something you did when you were in high school or college. And I can tell you this, and these two guys will tell you, when you start arresting people, the whole world changes. Anybody that has ever drank a beer with you throws it up in your face. Now you're a cop and you're gonna arrest me. Well, I remember back in high school, we used to get drunk together. Now you know, all of that kind of stuff. You know, in law enforcement, your past is your future. And that's the best way I can put it. Your past is your future. And I know it's so hard to say, look, I'm not perfect, and nobody is. But in today's society, where you have so many things like social media, when we were coming up, we could do things and probably, if our best friends didn't tell on us, nobody would know about it. It's not like that anymore. When you put stuff out there for the world to see, the world sees it. And there's a day that you'll have to answer for that. And in law enforcement, unlike any other profession, those days will come to haunt you, because you're going to have to go through background checks. You're going to have to be on trial. And that trial is as much about you as a person and your integrity as it is about the person who killed somebody. So I tell all young people, understand what you're doing in this whole world of social media. I had to fire people because of things they posted after they got the job they dreamed of. I had a forensic scientist in Memphis. Now this young lady went to a very prestigious university, got her biology degree, became a forensic scientist, and posted something stupid on her Facebook page. And you know, as you well know, all your friends are really not your friends. Some of her friends took it off her Facebook page, gave it to her supervisor, and I had to fire her. And she wasn't the only one. I would say in my last 4 or 5 years, I dismissed more employees over social media than I did anything else. And it used to really frustrate me because, you know, there were 1,600 people wanting this job, and you got it. And what did you do once you got it? You went and did something stupid, just the way it is. You know, that's a choice you make. You know, life's about choices. That's a choice you make. You know, you gotta take a polygraph. One of the questions that's gonna be asked on that polygraph before you get hired, have you ever done drugs? Now, you can sit there and check the box on the application, no. You can check it no all day long. But when polygraph time comes, you got problems. And I had more people that would go through, and the polygraph's the last thing you do. You go through this months of interviews and all this stuff. And you get down to the polygraph. And when the polygrapher asks you that question, have you ever done drugs? Now, there's people that'll check, yes, I've recreation, marijuana and all that, and we get that. We would understand that. And then the polygrapher would say, I see here you've done da-da-da-da-da. Is that the only thing? And then, there's a problem. Well, yeah, when I was in college, to stay up during exam week, I would take these pills, and then there you go. There you go. So understand that everything you do in life has consequences. Some are good consequences, and some are bad consequences. But when you start really getting into the world of wanting to compete for high-level positions, high-level jobs, understand that your past is your future. One other thing I want to touch on that Brian was talking about is that you don't necessarily have to carry a badge and a gun to be in law enforcement. I created a fusion center within TBI, which is an intelligence center where they gather and disseminate intelligence. And there are a lot of people that say, I want to be in law enforcement. I just don't want to carry a gun and arrest people and do all that. They want to be analysts. And I can tell you that there is no more coveted position in law enforcement, especially on the state and federal level now, than analysts. To the point where I went over just about 3 weeks ago and met with the senior officials of Tennessee State University and also Middle Tennessee State University. And I told both universities, you need to start an analyst degree. Because there's really no training for analysts other than on-the-job training. So what happens, really the only way to hire an analyst is you have to have someone with a military background that was an analyst in the military. And which is, I think, just unfair to everybody that goes to a college and want to come out and be in law enforcement, but they can't. So I'm in the process now working with both of those universities to try to come up with an undergraduate, graduate degrees in some type of behavioral science analyst position. And I think we're close. I think we're very close to doing that. But I'm going to tell you, if you want to make the money in law enforcement, become an analyst. I paid my analysts way more than I paid my agents. There's no way I could keep them. And the agents didn't like it, but that's just the way it was. I had to, because the military or the private sector would snatch those analysts up so quick, because everything today is data-driven. Law enforcement is data-driven. The pharmaceutical companies are data-driven. The military, everything has to have data to back it up. You can't do anything just because I think it's a good idea anymore. I gotta have the data to back it up. If I wanted positions in my budget at TBI, I had to have the data to back it up, why I needed those positions. And I can tell you that is the most coveted position, I think, in the private sector or the government sector is analyst right now. And if you want to make good money, take a look at that, being an analyst. I think I've probably gone over my time, but any questions for me? Anything?
What proportion of your department is forensic?
Forensic makes up a good portion. I think when I left, there was probably close to 150 forensic scientists and forensic technicians. We had an entry-level position called forensic technician, and they were the people that would accept the evidence when law enforcement would bring it in. And so we were kind of unique in that area too, because most law enforcement agencies that have forensic laboratories had went to civilian personnel. But I refused to do that because, number one, I wanted my forensic scientists. We have a special retirement at TBI. Well, state law enforcement and anybody else that wanted to opt into it. But, and the only way those forensic scientists could get that retirement, they had to be commissioned. Another thing was our crime scene response teams all came out of the forensic division. And I just was not going to let them go out here to these crime scenes and not be armed. So I really fought hard to not make those civilian positions and to keep them commissioned positions. But probably about 150 forensic scientists. Our criminal division, I think, was up to around 280, 290 when I left. So that's kind of the balance. We had 5 laboratories at one time. We consolidated that down to 3. But it's, you know, one of the hardest jobs that I had was trying to tackle the backlog in the forensic division. It's just, you know, it's kind of like whack-a-mole. You get one down, and next thing you know, the legislature will pass some DUI law or something. And what people didn't understand about forensics was that I could hire an investigator, and we had a 24-week, I think, academy. And after 24 weeks, that individual's out here working cases. Forensic science was totally different. If I hired a forensic scientist, depending on the discipline, it was between a year and 2 years before that forensic scientist would ever work a real test on a real case, because they had, the training is so extensive. And that was another reason I wanted to keep them commissioned, to pay them more, so these private laboratories didn't steal them. So yeah.
My son has wanted to be FBI, TBI since he's about 7 years old.
Sure.
He's 12 now.
Sure.
Besides starting at the local level and watching what he puts on Facebook, et cetera, is there any other thing that you would say, this is what you need to do, this is right, you need to go?
Yeah, well, communication skills. You know, I tell everybody, I majored in communications in college. It's the best thing I ever did. Because I could come out and I could write a pretty good report. You know, you know, you could read it and it made sense. Trust me, I've hired agents that with 4-year degrees, and they would write a report and it looked like a first grader. It's terrible. Have good communication skills, like Brian said. Be able to write, you know, coherently, you know, and you got to be a leader to be a TBI agent. I tell people my best leadership days was when I was an agent, not director, when I was an agent, because I would walk into a crime scene and there would be local law enforcement and they're all waiting for the TBI to come. And they're standing there and they're like, what you want me to do? So you got to be a leader. You know, you got to be able to lead people and make decisions. And what I was told in my interview with TBI is you got to be able to go from point A to point B by yourself. We don't have, you know, TBI is a state agency. So when I was in McMinnville, my supervisor was in Chattanooga. I was at the Chattanooga region. Well, he couldn't stand over me when I had a homicide. And okay, Martin, you go interview this person, and after you interview that person, you go over and interview that person. You got to get from point A to point B by yourself. So you know, make sure that as he's growing up, you talk a lot about leadership and what that means.
Is there a particular degree he should attain?
You know, I think if I was starting all over again, if I didn't major in communications, I'd look at some kind of computer science type degree. Because you can come into TBI in our technical services division, the people that do the forensics on cell phones and computers and all that, and you make more money as an agent.
I guess what I meant was bachelor's, master's.
You gotta have a bachelor's to be a TBI agent.
Okay.
You gotta have it. Or an FBI agent. Gotta have a bachelor's.
So say like you don't use social media or like any Facebook or Twitter, would that like look suspicious that you don't?
No.
Or,
No, as long as you got a good explanation
I see,
when you come in the interview, just say, that's not my thing.
I see.
You know, and I'm not telling you not to. I've just seen so many people be devastated over that. I mean, they would come in and say, you know, my dream is to be a TBI agent. That's what I want to do. You know, we became a very popular agency with big cases like the Holly Bobo and things like that. So everybody wanted to be a TBI agent, but you know, they just hadn't prepared themselves. You know, life is about preparation. I'm a firm believer that the door opens for all of us. The ones that make it are the ones that are prepared to walk through the door when it opens. I can tell you, just like for me, when Mr. Huckabee came up to me, sitting in Jay's that day, he was about 6 months at that time from retirement. And when I was hired, I was hired in May, he had retired in March. So that was the window I had to walk through. You know, the door opened, and that was how tight. Had I not met, had I met him 6 months later, I probably wouldn't be standing here as former director of TBI. So I tell everybody, you gotta, hope is not a plan, people. I'm just telling you, hope is not a plan. I hope I'm gonna get this, and I hope I'm gonna do this, and I'm hoping, that's not a plan. Have a plan. And the earlier you can have that plan and set your goals, the quicker you're gonna get there. You know, we're all got our 30 years in and still relatively young. But I know people that are the same age we are, and they don't have 5 years in. Now either they're gonna work till they're 95, or they're gonna be left out in the cold at some point without a job and no money. The earlier you can develop your plan of what you wanna be, and the earlier you can get into that career. Like Brian said, he started at 19. He could have retired 10 years ago, and he would have a check for the rest of his life. Think about it, the rest of his life. We all can. You know, I got a check for the rest of my life, insurance for the rest of my life. Gotta have a plan. And you can't hop around. I mean, they're already watering down a lot of the retirement plans now and turn them into these 401k plans, where you contribute so much money, they contribute so much money. As long as the market and everybody's making money, you're okay. But if it goes south, you're not okay. And that's what happened to the FBI and a lot of the federal agencies. Back in the 80s, they went to a 401k plan, and they promised all the agents that they would retire as millionaires. Well, they didn't. They put money in there, a lot of money in there, and they lost a lot of money. So when they retired, they had to get another job. And that's what I tell people about federal agencies. I will never talk bad about any federal agency. They're all great. But do your homework. Ask about what the retirement plan is. Because you're young now, and it don't seem like, hey, I've got forever to live and work. 30 years will go by just like that. Promise you. So wherever you go, and whoever you talk to about a job, you know, I know you want it, you want to say all the right things, and you just want to answer the questions that they have. But it's okay to ask questions in your interview like, what's the retirement plan here? Do you have a pay plan, a step plan? 5 years from now, how much money will I be making if I stay here? 10 years, 20 years? You need to ask those questions. Anything else? Well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it, and hope to come back sometime.
Thank you, Mark.